with Renee.
Yo. We wait all week and all day for more Saturdays with Renee.
Right. What's up, world? Welcome back to episode 52 of Saturdays with Renee Johnston, Geechee, y'all. I'm Jared Ball, and featuring special guest, the better, the improved Jared Ware of Millennials Are Killing Capitalists. What's up, good people? Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the remixers. Welcome.
I see Geechee got his hair. We do a little thing going. What's
it's
going
Saturday.
on there?
It's a big day. It's Saturday.
Hey, how my mic sound? My mic sound nice? Check
Yeah.
1 2 check 2. Oh,
You good? You good?
yeah. You know I'm in these streets right quick, man. I'm having hard times with these people.
You always in these streets.
Listen, man.
Where's Geechee?
I just got from a meeting where one of the leaders on the little board for the community was like, "Will there be an increase in police so that we can get a sense of security?"
Oh Lord.
I said, "Oh shit, I gotta leave." And I just thought about that yesterday when y'all was like, I don't have time to argue with these type of people. So I was like, oh,
it's hard, man. It's hard. It's hard, especially when it's people you like when when they're your people and you love them and you just want them to just have like a small bit of like common sense. Like I don't know. I don't know what we're gonna do, y'all. Every now and again I look around and I'm like, man, we're all fucked. Like we just
What a Chinese brother at? In the comments they said Hiram was Chinese.
Yeah,
what happened to Hiram?
I don't know what happened to Hiram. I thought he was supposed to be here.
Let's put out the call. I'm gonna put out the call.
He's big timing us again.
I know. We'll see if he shows
up. So CPT don't mean color people, means Chinese people time. So
that's what it means.
But that he answered in Mandarin. I was done. He answered in Mandarin. I'm like, what's wrong with you, man?
Listen, I acknowledge we all collectively address a lot of important topics and emotive topics and whatever. But we do also encourage that I encourage folks at least to be a little bit more direct and clear in some of the criticisms that we get. So there he is. I don't know why he's in the chat.
Why he in the chat?
Bro, you entered the wrong door, bro. Like you ain't coming to right.
Check the email thread, Hiram. There's a lot of emails on the thread, but it's in there.
So Hiram was accused,
it is a lot of emails.
So the criticism is not very clear, or never mind accurate. So Hiram was accused of being a Chinese Communist Party member or sympathizer.
No, he was a puppet. He was a puppet. He was a Chinese puppet.
Or he is Chinese. He is a Chinese puppet, and I'm a liberal Zionist, and I don't remember what else was said yesterday, but we some folks get triggered. I mean, and lose their sense of direction when it comes to the targeting of their analysis or their critique. But it's all good.
Yeah, the comments can be a dark place, man. I mean, it's funny. That's I have really appreciated being on YouTube because of the live interaction that you get with folks. It can sometimes be distracting, but I really appreciate it. It's been helpful for me, especially since October 7th last year, almost a year ago. But the comments could be anywhere. I mean, it can be from, join, I also get emails from people now in different kinds, like join, join our revolutionary party, or the person you had has the wrong, it's all kinds of stuff. Some principled, some very reactionary, some so you just never know. The comments are you don't get that when you just do an audio podcast. Like, people don't engage with you in that way. So, for better or worse.
I try. So, I have this rule about, I give myself 24 hours. I read the comments. I respond to the ones that I feel like are like legitimate questions, or ones where like I don't want the statement to be out there in the ether without me checking somebody. So like every now and again, I'll be like, I'm gonna respond, and I'm not responding because I feel like what you're saying makes sense. I'm responding so that the next person who comes on here and reads this madness doesn't read it and not see a response. So, so I do that, and I make that effort because I feel like it's worth. But sometimes people just be.
It's just disingenuous. I mean, because I would love it if people would say, because I'm with you, well, all of you on this. I mean, I would love it if people would say, okay, here in this video, because sometimes they do it, and I love this. They'll put in a comment at 14:27, Jab, you said this, what's up? Boom, push play. It's helpful. And, I don't agree with this. You said this in this video at this time, or you were, making it cool. I love all of that. It's the disingenuous stuff that are non sequiturs and non starters and not meant to be serious. So what do you say to that other than respond in Mandarin?
To that point, somebody raised a really good principled comment in the discussion we had yesterday, because they said, I had talked about that phrase again. It is easier to act your way into a new form of thinking than think your way into a new form of action. I talked about the origins of it, as far as I could tell, within like self-help and AA circles. And the person raised like, AA offers a lot to people, and that like, and this is very true. Like, I won't say who, but I have a close family member who spent like decades in an AA program and is also one of the best committed activists people, and is able to like wrestle with people through contradictions and all of this. And she credits a lot of this to her participation in 12-step programs. And so, the only clarification I could add was like, actually it's the self-help portion that gives me a little bit of pause, because self-help, I think, especially within the Western world, tends to be very individualized, very focused on like kind of a, almost like a prosperity gospel kind of thing of like, this is like, often it's like kind of how you get rich sort of stuff, or how you can get your, your kind of economic house in order stuff, that I think, for all the reasons of like the work that you do, Jared, we can see the contradictions and the problems with focusing on these kind of individual analyses that are often based in like, you have to do these specific behaviors and act this way, and then things are going to work out for you, because it's not just that discounts like all the structures and everything else. But I actually do think that there's a lot that people can take from like 12-step programs, and a lot of it is really kind of materialist in terms of, and then also very much based on engaging, because you have to, there's constant meetings, you have to listen to people and work with them, you have to sponsor other folks and help them. So there's like a social relation aspect of 12-step programs that I also think a lot of us that are more individualized and isolated probably miss. And it so I did clarify with that person, like, that's a very good critique, and I agree with you, basically.
So I agree with that too. So there's this book, right? I read this book a while back, and I thought I got a good bit from it, but as soon as when it started talking about money, I like closed the book. I was done. But and I think even with the quote, when it how it talks about like the
subconscious, I really, oh my God, yeah, sorry,
the conscious mind and subconscious mind, like there's some things that I took out the book. I was like, oh, this is valid, but like the end goal of the book is how to program your subconscious mind to make more money. And I'm like, no, not that part, but just
so I admit
useful.
I have a massive bias against, admittedly, both religion and self-help, and so that's why my bias against the 12-step programs emerges, because in those spaces, despite what you were saying, Jared, my experience has been different. I could share the story another time in its fullness, but I did at one point in high school go to rehab. I went to did a 45-day inpatient program. I had to do a couple of years of various forms of counseling, going to AA and NA meetings, and what is it, the Narcotics Anonymous for the families, Narcanon, I think it used to be, something like that, Al-Anon for the alcoholics, for alcoholics. And whether it's literal Lord's prayers to start meetings, or one of the steps is giving up, accepting what you cannot change. But then I thought there was another one specifically to accept things like forces beyond. And then it felt for me, like, even to your point about the sponsorships and all of that, it felt more like it could be helpful, but it could also be policing and surveillance and keeping you in the fold and shepherding. And that was just but at the same time, the higher power. Thank you, Adam Smith. Yeah, the higher power. But the problem with my criticism of it is that, to your point, and I witnessed it with, those programs are helpful, can be helpful. And when people are in the throes of these massive addictions, I can't, it's hard to be mad at whatever the lifeline is. So it's almost the same way I felt about, when I've even been in some of the streets, so to speak, with Nation of Islam folks. It's like I have real criticisms, but when you look at these brothers in their in particular brothers in their face, and they're like, yo, if it wasn't for the minister, I would be bah, 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 bah. And it's like, what do you, it's just hard to, anyway. So but to the initial point, when someone offers up a principled criticism that allows for conversation and exploration and exchange, cool. We don't, it's fine. It doesn't have to be, it's those non sequitur ad hominems, whatever's, that are like, yo, all right. Okay. I don't know how should we proceed, Renee? What's the plan? What's the plan? Because we don't want Jared getting in trouble with Warrior Class 2 now.
Listen. So we have all this stuff on the HBCUs, which is kind of your forte, which I guess we can start at, unless folks want to start somewhere else. I think what I'd really like to examine today, and my mother, FYI, my mother sent me a text that was like, what a great conversation y'all had. So we're on the right track. Whenever moms is on board, I know we're on the right track.
I mean, it's like,
but I'd like today, if we can, to dig a little bit into how this is working right now, in the sense of Kamala becoming what I see as a media candidate, right? Because if we look at where she was in media, even as the vice president, right? She was very rarely touted. Like, she was not on screen. They were not talking about her. They weren't praising her. They weren't following her around. And
wasn't there a moment where everybody was like, where is she?
Right.
Wasn't there like a time like, where is she? Yeah.
Yeah, that was literally the conversation. Like, she was like the least seen vice president, I think, like, ever, right? She just got no anything. And then all of a sudden now she is everywhere, which I think is, literally a construction of media based on a decision that people outside of the general population decided, okay, we're going to put her in place. We're going to promote her. We're going to put her everywhere. We're going to show her everywhere. And we're going to convince everybody that everybody loved her even before anyone knew what she was doing. And it seems to be working, right? I mean, I can't say for sure, like, how it's all going to play out, but it does seem to me that now all of a sudden everyone's acting like they've always supported, it's very odd to me to watch this all play out. So, I think if we look at some of how the media has constructed this person that is now going to be at the top of the ticket, put there by the Democrats with no say-so from any voter, because she was not on ballot anywhere for anyone to choose her. Like to remind people of that, those of you who love to talk about democracy, but who are now like all behind her, even though she was nowhere at all part of the process. But okay, I've said my piece. But we can, we can dig into some of these things, like, some of how this is all playing out and working in an attempt to get people to see how the media is working, how the propaganda is working, and how we are all being fed this story about Kamala Harris that is in no way, shape, or form related to the reality of the situation.
I mean, I could start there. I mean, first of all, thank you, Renee, Jared, Geechee, for doing these couple days, and hopefully Hiram will find the link at some point. But appreciate being in conversation with you all and the invitation, and appreciate all the work that you all do. But I mean, so I think it's important to be clear that like this was a ruling class coup within the Democratic Party, of that there was a real realization that Biden could not win this election. Not that he didn't have like, I mean, even he said at some point like that he would have to be convinced that he had no chance of winning before he would step aside, right? And apparently he was at some point convinced of that. And and so then they get in the position where the only person that they can pass his nominations onto is her, because she was also, I guess, on that ticket, right, during the primary process, even though she was the vice presidential candidate, without going to an open convention, right, which they didn't want to go to an open convention because that would require then that there's actually some democratic process, that people have input on what different policies the platform is going to have, that they would have to reapproach some of these progressive ideas that were floating around everywhere in 2020, including with Kamala in that period, by the way. I mean, if people go back and look at her 2020 campaign and compare it to this, it's staggering how politically different it is in terms of, and Trump, they all latch on to this and show the, oh, you wanted to give healthcare to migrants. You were for a very not an open, I mean, they would say an open border policy, but the reality was it was much more modest in terms of like how draconian she is now in terms of border deportation, all of these things. And so basically, my read is that she wouldn't have been the first choice either of the bourgeoisie or the, even we could get beyond like obviously not the voters. I think you can look at 2020 and see how unpopular she was as a candidate during that primary season, but she wouldn't have been their choice either, but they were stuck, right? And this was very much like, even with that debate performance from Biden, like immediately afterwards in the reaction stuff, they were like, oh no, like the people are blowing up my phone. We got to get this lady out of here. I mean, this guy out of here. Sorry. And so yeah, and then that propaganda machine worked really hard to stop Biden from running, then worked really hard to get Kamala support after she became the nominee. And so, I mean, the one thing that sticks to me we did an episode with Eric Stanley and Gemma DeCristo, who were both organizers and academics as well from the San Francisco Bay Area, who have organized against her for many years as an attorney, as a DA, and in those different roles. But they said the thing about her is that she is so politically malleable. Like she has always been that. So she has always been able to sort of shift with the tides of what seemed like the kind of approach, the pragmatic approach to getting, to winning an election, that they're like, okay, well, now she could be a Republican basically in the Democratic Party, which is, I think, what we see now. And that's the read, is like the strategy right now from the Democrats is to split the Republican Party, get as many votes as they can from that side, and not worry at all about what people on the left think who care about policy and things like that. So that's like my quick thumbnail of, I think, what we've seen. But yeah, I mean, I agree. She is a media candidate. It is constant sort of propaganda that has now shifted her into, a kind of darling. And yeah.
No, absolutely. And so I actually forgot until you were just saying so were you saying that, so she was initially running more to her left, or running more to the left of
Yeah.
Biden initially, to try to
If
position
you
herself? Yeah. Okay.
if
I
if
forgot
you
about
go
that.
back to that 2020 campaign, she was kind of trying to compete with Sanders and Warren on policy. So she had a Medicare for all proposal. It was a little bit more like market driven than what they were proposing, but it was still trying to get universal health care. It included health care for people who were undocumented. It
Wow.
and so and then
It
and
was one of those,
and
I know I'm
again,
not
this is
going to win campaigns. That's what it was.
yeah, I mean, and
No, I know. Yeah.
and so she was the least popular of the people kind of running on a more progressive, quote unquote, agenda. I mean, she was behind Warren, who was well behind Sanders, right? But yeah, I mean, and it didn't play. It didn't have any kind of popularity on the mass level. But now she's very far, obviously, to the right. So she's to the right of where Biden ran now in 2020 as well.
Right. And I just dropped real quick, Geechee. I see, just hold on. Because Abandoned Harris captured this exact thing perfectly. And I was like, wow.
Okay, so hold on. Let me. Okay, so note the new alliance isn't due to Liz Cheney shifting left. In fact, Liz Cheney hasn't budged at all. All right. Kamala Harris is a radical liberal. This is back in August of 2020. Kamala Harris is a radical liberal who would raise taxes, take away guns and health insurance, and explode the size and power of the federal government. She wants to recreate America in the image of what's happening in the streets of Portland and Seattle. We won't give her the chance. A few minutes later. It's an honor to have the endorsement of Liz Cheney, says Kamala Harris. The vast majority of us agree we must hold sacred America's fundamental principles. If you share that view, no matter your political party, there is a place for you in this campaign. So yeah, and now they're doing rallies together.
Right. Go ahead, Geechee.
So you know how I guess in organizations or whatever, there's like the community engagement team, the team who like creates the I guess the propaganda. So I kind of look at like the political punditry, the Charlemagne's as those people. And so I know they're in rooms, and I remember particularly when Charlemagne was talking about main character energy. He was like, Biden doesn't have it. And he named a lot of people. He never really named Kamala. And so even when you look at,
you need to stop that. You really need to stop that. Angela Ryan and whatever's going to get you. You're going to be next.
But even if you look at Jarrett's picture behind him, that don't even look right for her to be like she don't even, it's just not, I don't know. She just doesn't have that main character energy. And I feel like that's really what they're going for. But I guess they are trying to see if their media blitz and their communications, their propaganda can morph her into main character energy, but I'm not sure that it's really working.
MCE, she just don't have main character energy. You know that MCE.
Yeah, she ain't got it, man.
No, but so Jared, that's where I slightly ended up in a disagreement with Kamala, and I'm not sure, I can't remember who else on this one, because Kamala seemed and a few seemed to want to give Kamala a little bit more. My other favorite word, agency, in pushing herself to the fore. And I've always felt like it was not that they were desperate. I even feel like they probably reached out to some others and were probably told, no, I'm not going to rush my campaign. I'm going to wait till whoever you put up here next fails, and I'll come in next time. And then she was just standing there, having no support, no interest. Even Renee, the article you sent from Jacobin from 2019 is tearing her up. I'd be interested to see. I don't follow Jacobin, but are they now have they started supporting her and or saying we have to vote for her as the lesser of evil? Because in that article you sent, they were in 2019. They were like, nah.
Well, what's fun? The reason I sent that article is because Geechee sent that video of the young lady talking about her alternate program to prison in California. And to me, this was like the quintessential people run with this idea. It's clearly something that she read somewhere that she, you know what I mean? And she was like, oh, look at this awesome program. You all keep calling her Kamala, but look at this thing that she tried to do for people. Go ahead and run it, and then we can talk about the Jacobin.
Is so weird because it's not even fully true. She is actually responsible for some of America's earliest alternatives to prison initiatives. Have you heard of Back on Track? She started it in 2004. It allowed nonviolent offenders who were low-level drug dealers to plead guilty but postpone their sentencing. And then over the next year or so, they would do community service, get their high school diplomas if they didn't have one, and get a job. They were required to see a judge regularly and take drug tests. Upon graduating the program, the court would dismiss the case and expunge their record.
It's about, yeah, you did commit a crime, accept it, own up to it, and then let's talk about what we can do to change the circumstances going forward.
During these 6 years in which Harris oversaw the small pilot program in San Francisco, 200 people graduated. Less than 10% of participants ended up back in the system, compared to 53% of drug offenders not in the program who returned to prison or jail within 2 years of release. See, the thing is, you can argue that Harris shouldn't have even prosecuted a good amount of those low-level drug crimes, and yes, I'd agree with you. But in that time, weed was illegal in California, and perhaps even more powerfully, America wasn't even 2 decades removed from the war on drugs narrative that plagued the 80s and 90s. The fact of the matter is, America has the largest prison system in the world. The entire system is fucked, and if you insist on holding every single person who ever played a role in that system accountable for it, that is fair. But you should also give those who work to change it, even in minuscule ways, credit for what they did too. This dig about Kamala.
Nah, Joe.
Right. And so just real quick, J-Dub, because I can see it. Like, I can see it. But this is part of the problem, right? So you have this young Black woman telling this story, like all excited to undo why you shouldn't be seeing Kamala as a cop and look at this good. And I answered her video and I was like, sis, it would have taken you 2 seconds to do a little bit of research and find out, like, you shouldn't have made this video, right? And I shared the Jacobin article because I thought I was going to fall into this rabbit hole trying to find, like, and it was no rabbit hole. Like, I did one quick search and found this article and I was like, bruh, like, you couldn't have done this before you posted this video. But I'll stop there so J-Dub can share what his thoughts were.
No, I mean, it might be more interesting to have you share some of the highlights from that article. I mean, I would just say that, like, I have friends in the Bay Area who organize. Brooke Terpstra, who I know, Jared and I, he was part of the Journalism for Liberation and Combat stuff, who organizes in Oakland. Shout out to Brooke and Oakland Abolition and Solidarity. But, like, one of the things that's understood within the Bay Area is what a cesspool it is for different forms of liberal counterinsurgency, right? What a cesspool it is for these kind of I mean, Newsom, who's the governor now, like, one of his big things is on, transforming San Quentin into this, a Nordic style prison, like this idea that, like, somehow the prison is similar to the Norwegian model, which, is and we did an episode that totally, like, debunks that and how it gets used within the US, but the broader point to make is that these types of programs are, I mean, one, it would be interesting to look at the failures of it, right, on its own kind of terms, but often it's just, like, really about marketing and, like, window dressing on these extremely repressive systems, right? And again, I mean, this is the thing. And so California is one of those areas where those contradictions are extremely heightened because you have an overwhelming majority Democratic state in terms of representation and in terms of like most of the cities, etc. So they kind of have to do these things to appeal to progressives on some kind of symbolic media campaign level. But they're always just a way of making this very oppressive system seem more palatable or seem like they're doing something within it that is progressive. But it's never like decarceration. It's never like, reducing. I mean, she fought against efforts to decarcerate, even as like the Supreme Court said, you actually have to let prisoners out because it's overcrowding, and this is violating people's Eighth Amendment rights, right? So, yeah. Anyways, I mean, I think that kind of narrative of her is BS, and it's very interesting because her sister also did a lot of the research on the new Jim Crow book, and her mother is close friends with Cedric Robinson, and like, so there is this very interesting kind of progressive / liberal milieu that she comes out of, but in terms of her actual track record, it's terrible really on these things. And there is a lot of symbolic stuff, but I mean, you just look at what she's running on now, it's a very conservative agenda on the whole.
Just
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, just quickly, I was going to say, like, and I mentioned this before, but another engagement that I had where I was when I was younger, I did a little bit of a seminary training, and homiletics is a powerful tool. Like the tone and cadence of the way you talk. And I know FD told you this, Jared, but that just makes you even more believable. So those videos, the cadence and the tones, and there's a lot of those. I don't even remember all their names, but it's a lot of black men who kind of do these like real talk videos, and but they're not listening to anything that she's saying. They're not gonna follow up on anything. She just seems believable, and so I think that's to
this day. I mean, again, whether you're in a lot of preachers sound the same. All the NOI preachers still sound like Malcolm. So everybody, yeah. So, and if it's effective, I get it. And there's even forms of it, I'm sure, that appear in the classroom. There are moments I feel, it's like the equivalent of what do they call it when you're an athlete in a game and you're incapable of missing. I forgot what they even call it. You're in the zone or whatever. You just fall into the cadence, and you can see it working. And it's not necessarily that people are hanging on every word or listening or catching every meaning. It's like, no, that just sounds, oh yeah, I don't know what he's saying. That's
I like them people.
I like that. I like that. Just quickly, since you mentioned it, it's been coming up a lot for some reason in my spaces lately. I think so. I want to go this back up a little bit, which I think is a classic essay from Greg Thomas back in 2012. Why some like the new Jim Crow so much. It's long, it's thorough, and I think explains damn near perfectly the liberalism inherent in Michelle Alexander's approach and why people like Kamala would have been. It makes sense what you're saying, because in that Jacobin issue that you sent, Renee, or that essay that you sent, I mean, just among the other things in saying that her program failed, it wasn't just that what we saw in that sister's video, a little bit of weed here and there and all of that. It was that Harris assigned senior prosecutors to handle graffiti cases, vandalism, auto burglary, the anti-truancy pushed. She opposed body cameras, failed to independently investigate high-profile police shootings. I mean, there's a lot of stuff she didn't do. And then what ends up happening when we get people making the arguments like in that video, that we should show some sign of appreciation for any semi-good thing that someone does. This is how we end up with the argument now that we should vote for her because she's slightly less or slightly better at genocide than what Trump would be. It's that same kind of logic. And at no point do we ever get to put on the table that none of this is acceptable, and only people who get rid of this stuff are people we should support, not the people who find some little page in the book that they can dog ear the corner of and say, look, I made an impact on the narrative of this, you know. No.
Right.
So yeah.
And those 200 people that she, you know, so, you know, excitedly highlighted, like if you read the article, I think it was something like 13,000 people who had been like arrested in that. Like it was an obscene amount of people. Like, you know, for people to, you know, this thing that happens, and this is one of the things about social media that I truly dislike, and this is coming from a person who remembers when the internet did not exist, right? So, you know, my understanding of the role that, look at that, 14,500 felony drug, like it's just absurd. So if you even just look at the numbers in the chart, it affected such a small number of people out of the grand scheme of people who had been caught up in that system due to her policies, right? And so for me, what's truly distasteful is someone picking up on wherever she read about this program, not doing her due diligence and research, putting up this video as if she had done her due diligence and research, and then putting this thing out there so as an excuse, like, so see, you can't really just say that Kamala was just, the broad only worked in prosecutor's office for her entire career as an attorney before she ran for Senate. She only ever worked with cops, period. So, you know, I don't want to have, I was so frustrated when I watched that, because for me, this is the problem. You have people who are jumping in, picking and choosing these really minuscule things and highlighting them as if it is a reason to overlook all the other things that are also in existence. And for me, even if she saved those 200 people, which who knows, right? Like that's a big assumption that just because those 200 people got their high school diploma, that, you know, their lives would change for the better in this cesspool of capitalism that we all live in, right? So that's a wild leap of assumption. But to utilize this storyline and highlight it the way she did, when she clearly don't even know what she's talking about because she did no research, no actual research, drives me bananas. So these are the things that I want people to look out for, because these are the things that are going to circle back. Like this is what's going to circle back when you're talking to your friend with their blue sign, with their purple sign in the lawn, right? They're going to bring up that they watched this girl and they talked about how she really worked to change, you know, the system when she was the DA. And you have to be able to counter that with reality. And so there's something that you can utilize to counter it, because, you know, we all need support.
You are right. You're right. But the problem, I think, is what we said yesterday, is that it's not that after you show the incorrectness of their argument in that one instance, they will end up reverting back to, so what you want us to do, vote for Trump? I mean, she's still better than Trump. She's still, you know, I mean, so that's where I find this to be frustrating, and where I find it to be a little bit disingenuous when we have these arguments with people, because they're not voting because they researched the bot program and found her work there good. They're looking for anything to justify and throw up in somebody's face at initial levels of criticism, and then when you just expose it as flawed at best, well, you know, she was doing the best she can, and what you want, Trump? And
she the weaker enemy, man.
We'll be able to organize better against with her in office.
But so here's the question, right? So do you not say it?
Oh no, I'm with you. Well, I wouldn't. Once somebody presents them at this point, unless we're on a panel or in some sort of professional space or in my classroom, once people present themselves, first of all, I don't engage much at all outside of those settings. But once someone presents themselves as this is who I'm voting for, I can't. Not that the work isn't needing to be done. I just am not the one for it. That's my shortcoming there.
It's a tricky space. And I don't.
It's like when we were doing, sometimes you got to recognize when you're not the one. It's like when we were doing Cop Watch and we're in Southeast DC one night, and it turned out to be one of my high school students that happened to be on the corner with his homeboys and saw me out there. But his homeboy yelled out initially, seeing me with the little group I was with, yo, we don't like white people. And I realized, they were talking about me. And I turned around and I said, we don't either. but once it became clear, like, well, if Jared is if I'm recognized as white in the community late at night doing a cop watch, Jared need to stay home or be repurposed elsewhere in the formation tactically. So that's where I just recognized, then my students saw me, was like, no, that's Mr. Ball. but
so real quick. So here's a question from the chat. Is it useful to engage in discussions around electoral politics on an informal?
Oh, my bad. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. I went to I saw the joke and I was trying to highlight it and sorry about that. My bad.
Around electoral politics on an informal but social level within the framework of ideology at the imperialist core. I mean, I guess that's the question I'm getting at, right? Like, do you say it even though it might not serve any purpose to change the person's mind in the moment? But similar to how I answer sometimes comments, and it's not really to address the person making the comment, it's to address the person who's going to read the comment after I've responded, right?
That's a good point.
So, and this is where it's tricky, because I also am not inclined to engage with, the purple flag wavers. Like, and I find it, as I'm saying it, very interesting that purple is the color, because y'all know red and blue makes purple. And so I wonder if that was, as I'm saying it,
sorority, right?
No, her sorority is pink and green.
Oh, okay.
So purple, like there was that weird movie on Netflix, Purple Hearts, which was like the Republican and the Democrat who like fell for each other thing. So I wonder if that's all intentional.
Oh.
I just fell down a whole different, sorry y'all.
And it's also wrapped up in the overriding attempt to diminish the legacy of Prince by tarnishing the color purple.
For reals. Anywho, but so this is an odd, like is it useful? What do y'all think?
So, Geechee, go ahead. I mean, so it's interesting. So I was reading a little bit of Lenin, partly because I thought Hiram was going to be here. And I'm like, if I was going to talk, I knew Hiram would bring Lenin in. And I'm like, okay, I got to be able to engage on this playing field with him. But I was reading conclusions from left-wing communism and infantile disorder, in which he's critiquing various forms of what he thinks of as ultra-leftism, and it doesn't get so much to the question you're asking, Renee, which is like, what do you do as an individual? Which I think is very challenging when we are engaging in these things on an individual basis, trying to convince, trying to think about what we should do as individuals and convince other people of what they should do as individuals. I really do think that one of the things channeling what I think Hiram would say in this moment is that this is why we have to be a part of organizations. It's why we have to be a part of parties, to think and strategize about how we're going to approach these things together. But like part of what Lenin says, he actually speaks to the American context. And obviously this is 1920, so it's a very different American context than what it is right now. And I think we need to understand that. But he does say, he says, communists in Western Europe and America must learn to create a new, unusual, non-opportunist, non-careerist, all there's Hiram, parliamentarianism. The communist parties must issue their slogans. Real proletarians, with the help of the unorganized and downtrodden poor, should scatter and distribute leaflets, canvass workers' houses, and the cottages of the rural proletarians and peasants in the remote villages. Fortunately, there are many times less remote villages in Europe than in Russia, not in America, though. They could go into most taverns, penetrate into the union societies and casual meetings where the common people gather and talk to the people, not in learned and not in very parliamentary language. They should not at all strive to get seats. This was an important part of it for me. Not at all strive to get seats in parliament, but should everywhere strive to rouse the minds of the masses and draw them into the struggle. And I think that to me was one of the pieces within this that, I think is really important. And it's sometimes missing also, even within left approaches to how parties and whatnot engage in the electoral arena. Like, is the purpose is to draw people into struggle, right? Into organizations, into getting involved in whether that struggles to better their own lot. But really he's thinking here, because he's talking about, Great Britain and America primarily, and other aspects of the imperial core, is that he's also talks about the importance of raising in Britain, for instance, the Irish question and the colonial question, right? So if we think forward today, you think about the importance of Palestine, of the relationship between the United States and Zionist settler colonialism, as well as all kinds of other forms of imperialism that the United States is involved in. He says it is a very difficult task to do this in Western Europe and America, very, very difficult, but it can and must be done. For the task of communism cannot be fulfilled without effort, and our efforts must be devoted to fulfilling practical tasks, ever more varied, ever more closely connected to all branches of social life, winning branch after branch and sphere after sphere from the bourgeoisie, right? So I just thought that was like a really well kind of articulated version of like how, obviously it's not speaking again to individuals, but like how a party or an organization should engage around electoral politics. Of the purpose of this is not to like get seats, that might happen, but that's not the purpose of engaging in these things. It's to really like push forward the struggle around these key issues, and so yeah, I mean, that I think Renee speaks to, like, I think you have a great approach in trying to talk to folks about these things and like, and push them on those. And but yeah, I think that's the purpose, right? Is to pull people out of these bourgeois ways of thinking about the US state and its electoral system. What's up, Hiram?
What's
Thank
up,
you.
Hiram? Welcome.
Hiram popped up just when J-Dub said his name like a ghost.
I said Lennon, and
that's what it was. He heard Hiram and Lennon. And
say what's up to us in Mandarin, bro. Say what's up to us in Mandarin. Give us some Mandarin, bro.
Ni hao. Ni hao.
Ni
hao. Greetings.
That is hysterical. Hysterical. Oh,
my red shirt.
I know. Everybody got red on. It's everybody but Geechee got the memo.
I'm technically wearing orange. I think this is technically orange, and it's a remix. But underneath the remix, it says "Remix Morning Show for Liberal Zionism." I'm just not going to show the whole shirt today. That's the part I love. Leave that part off.
I'm glad I didn't put on my purple shirt because I was about to put on a purple shirt.
So
Handyman.
So we're talking through this conversation about addressing the issue of Kamala Harris, right? So, I found all the things, not all the things because there's so many of them, but a few of the things that for me highlighted this real work that media and propaganda and all these people are doing in order to pretend as if, Kamala is now a media darling, right? And so the question that was brought was like, so what do you do in these streets? How does this work? And another question that somebody posed that I think we should grapple with a little bit is Brittany's question. I'm all for catharsis of talking about how terrible Kamala is, but I guess I'm more interested in what people in these spaces do when either she or Trump wins, lament and back to the same old same. And it's, it's a real question, right? Like, So we talked yesterday, and I brought up like part of the reason that I've decided to still be so invested in the Green Party in New Jersey, is because I am hoping that in some way that we can build a formation of people who are willing to do the thing, right? Like are willing to like fight those battles, be it on a local level. If we can somehow magically get somebody into Congress and hope that they don't do what all the other people who, you know, you fight to get in do, which is turn around and act like they forgot why they got there, right? Which is always the risk you take. But I think both of these questions are legitimate questions. Like, what do you do in a social setting? I'm a little more aggressive than most people, admittedly. So, you know, I live in that. And then what do you talk to people? How do you address the question of what happens when? Because I get that a lot, right? Like, well, you know, if she doesn't win, you're going to get Trump, and what are you going to do? And I try to remind people that I'm going to do the same damn thing that I did when he won the last time, right? like none of the work actually stopped because he won. The problem is the work for a lot of people stopped when Biden won. And so that, you know, that's the part of it that I keep trying to emphasize for folks. But what do y'all think?
So I think an example, so the meeting I was just at, community meeting, and there's always this cop who come in and he reads off of what happened in the community, like shoplifting, and probably 4 of the things on there he talked about young people going into stores grabbing food, and then another person grabbed something off a food truck. And now, granted, we're in like a food apartheid community. And then you have at one point another brother who's in the community was like, you know, there's some homeless people right up the road from this place that I own, and he's telling this to the cop, and I'm like, well, maybe a cop don't need to handle it. So rather Kamala's in the office or Trump is in the office, like, in your community right now, would you say people are pro-police or not? And I think, you know, in that space, like in that time, I didn't have time to like argue back and forth with them because majority of them probably are pro-cop, but I could ask a question and then kind of follow up later. But like, does a cop need to handle people who need food? Does a cop need to handle people who need housing? And just kind of pose that question, and like, I guess to drop seeds to talk later, but that's a struggle that it's going to take a lot of work. No matter which one of those people get in that office. So
I think good morning, y'all. Sorry I'm late. Good morning, remixes. The answer is Jared read the answer. Right. The elections, most folks are captured by the election because we have been trained to, we have been taught that, right? That is the whole, every institution inside of the United States exists to maintain, uphold, benefit the system, its institutions, right? And the economic base that exists, which is capitalism. And so to think that we're going to overnight or argue people into changing their minds is ill-sighted, right? You engage in this process, you talk about the election, you talk about the issues, you try to develop people's consciousness, but the main thing is building organizations. The main thing is building parties. It's not just Lenin that said it. It's every single revolution, all the way down to the Black Panthers, right? You need organizations and spaces where folks can come to so that when the situations continue to get bad, because regardless of who's in office, they're going to get bad because of capitalism, because of corporate domination of the planet, because of wage exploitation, because of wars, all that is going to get bad, right? We don't have to whittle it down to like the differences between these specific individuals. It's global capital and global capitalism. Those contradictions are always going to exist. In order to have rich, you're going to have poor, and the rich always want to get richer, which means there's going to be more poor. What I say is, you can have the conversations, you can push people's thinking to think deeper about the elections, think deeper about the candidates, think deeper about the whole process by which we elect our representatives, supposedly, or elect our leaders. How come they're all millionaires? We only elect millionaires. There's a wonderful video on YouTube called Mouseland that was created. I forgot who created. I think the story comes from Eugene Dez, but basically it's Mouseland, right? It was like the Socialist Party in Canada was talking about elections and and voting that folks should take a look at? The answer is build revolutionary parties, build independent political organizations that can provide the political education for folks, that can provide a space for folks to also be supported through the bad times, right? Mutual aid, as we understand it today, is just charity. You get a GoFundMe link, you give some folks. There's nothing mutual about that relationship, right? True mutual aid is a mutual benefit, a give and take in which you're sharing with each other and you're growing and protecting yourself in the way, right, that Kropotkin meant it when he wrote the book on mutual aid. You need organizations that are able to organize people, politicize people, raise the consciousness. It's not going to be overnight. It's going to be probably a few elections, right? But as they see conditions continue to deteriorate, you also have to create the fighting force that you can prove to the community that you can go out and win. So you're not just organizing them to sit in study groups or to sit in, these political education sessions and you look real cool on Instagram or whatever, right? But you're actually engaging in fights to win. The people in North Carolina need an organization. The people in Tennessee need an organization because the federal government isn't doing it. And so to wrap it up, what I would say is exactly what Comrade Lenin says, right? Is you build the organizations, you engage with them to the point that you can with the elections, you meet the people where they're at, you don't talk down to them, and you bring them to your side. And the way you do that is by having political projects that the people can believe in. You have to show something. You can't just have the right answers and just yell at people. You have to show them. You have to show and prove. Right? You have to show and prove. Prove to them that your way is the right way. Prove to them that your way is the way forward. And when you build those political projects and you build the organizations, then you have to have the capacity. And a comrade of mine reminded me of that this morning on his Instagram, right? That these organizations, the ones that do exist, you have to make sure that you have the infrastructure and the capacity to bring in the waves of people who are going to be radicalized and politicized in these moments. And they're going to be looking for something different. And they're going to come in droves. And you have to have the safety mechanisms in place as well to protect yourself from infiltration and all that. But you're going to have to prepare yourself to hold and carry the people who are going to be politicized in these moments, right? To then help politicize, radicalize them, organize them, and then push them out to push political projects that ultimately brings about the change that we're going to want to see in this country. Yes, engage with the elections in terms of conversations with people. Yes, have a plan for whoever's in office, whoever comes up. We know it's going to be bad regardless. Build the organizations, organize the people, build relationships with the people. Don't talk at them, talk with them. Build relationships with them, develop them, build political projects that can sustain us, that can protect us from the climate catastrophe, that can protect us from the economic catastrophes that are coming, that can protect us from the violence, the right-wing violence that's going to happen inevitably. For those political organizations, develop the capacities to defend our people physically and violently from the violence that is coming, and then build the political projects that the people can believe in, get behind, and ultimately push us forward to winning the change that we need to see.
And this is why you needed to come on. See?
Yeah.
See? This is why.
The only thing that I wanted to add to what
I'm not saying real quick, I'm not saying nothing new. There's nothing brilliant that I'm saying. This is proven, right? Decade after decade, time and time. Like it's I ain't saying nothing that hasn't already been done. Go to the source.
Right on. The one thing I found, so to the question you ask, Renee, about, people who feel like it's going to be worse, right? And this is something I think that particularly with the discussions around Project 2025, with the with January 6th, right, as a moment, and all of these things of people just really, and just a lot of the violence, the reactionary violence also that did exist during the Trump, his first term, and continued. It didn't go away, but I think I haven't seen the data, but it certainly was heightened during that period from what it was before. I think Kali Akuno's thinking around this is really important too is, this idea that do people think so if we really think if we're going to take seriously the idea that the right is a increasingly fascist force, right? And is interested in these uh whether we call them vigilante mobs or lynch mobs or however we think about them, do we think that the Democrats are going to stop that? Right? Do we think that we're going to be protected by Democratic police departments? I mean, as if like so then again, like in terms of organizing with people, and this is one of the things I appreciate about part of the approach that Kali lays forward is thinking about, okay, yeah, as Hiram says, the mutual aid component, like get really serious with mutual aid. It's not just charity, right? It's actually working with people within the community to cooperatively in an exchange, in a process where you can also engage politically with them, think with them, educate with them. And there's some differentiation too, because I think Hiram's talking in large part about building the revolutionary organization too. But there is also this component of mass work, right? That's really important, of how do we engage also with people who may not join that organization also, but you can still have a political relationship with them. As an organizer, as people working in the community, that's really important too. So you do the mutual aid, but then you also pair that also with really thinking about, if we're actually going to take that threat of fascism very seriously, then we know that we have to also build community defense that is actually capable of being serious about protecting people from that kind of violence. And that's scary, I think, for a lot of us to actually think about what that actually means in the long term or even in the short term. But the notion that like Kamala Harris getting elected is going to be the thing that's going to stop those people from organizing and planning and preparing to enact violence upon different swaths of marginalized people, like there's no reason to believe that, right? So again, like whoever wins, it's a problem that has to be organized against and prepared for. That actually, Kali makes the case that actually, if the Republicans win, that part may not happen as fast. It could be that if Kamala wins, that those people get, similar to January 6th, but much more on a much bigger scale this time. Those people become even more violent, right? Because of the fact that they think that the election's stolen and the system's rigged and so on, right? And so it's not, you can't predict based on which outcome comes what's going to trigger those people into sort of mass violence. And the scary thing about that, I think, is that it also produces a realization within a lot of us in the left that we're not adequately prepared at this moment to deal with the level of reactionary violence within our society that is already latent and widespread, right? And so that, I think, creates an urgency also, where people can organize around and think around and work together on. So that's the only thing I would add.
Yeah, and real quick, Hiram, because I see you waiting, but I want to add that I also want to present to people, like, well, what are you doing now? Because the question that I've posed over and over again for folks is like, where is this line of fascism that you all have drawn that we haven't crossed already? Right? So like, whenever I get into these conversations about preventing fascism and stopping Trump and all these things, like I ask people like, okay, well, what is it that you're afraid of? Because I think that's a really valid question to ask people. Like, what is it that you're afraid of? So somebody's answer was in one of these conversations, well, I'm really worried because Trump is encouraging and he really wants to put, qualified immunity like as like an absolute, like, cops can get away with everything. And I said, okay, so like, what are cops not getting away with right now that you think is going to increase and change so much in 2025 that you should be worried about it happening in 2025, but you are not worried about what's happening right now? And it just so happened that this conversation happened after the NYPD shot up a shot up a train, right? So I want people to stop being so concerned about this imaginary future that they're not considering the realities of their present, right? So like right now, the work should have been started. So if you're really concerned about fascism, if you're really concerned about how things could potentially change because of Project 2025, I want to know, so what are you going to do right now during Project 2024? Like what's the plan like right now? Like what are you doing between now and January that's gonna I don't know, prevent or give you some means to address the current realities? And that's the conversation that I feel like we're not having enough, because I recognize that people are concerned and they're afraid and they don't know what's going to happen, but this is also part of the media propaganda and part of what we're sold, right? Like I even question, like, were things really that much worse when Trump was in office, as far as like racism and reactionary and this, that, or is it because that's what we were told over and over and over and over, like this highlighting of these things so that people could say, like, look at how much worse things are? Because I feel like no matter in the almost 50 years I've been alive, I feel like my life has always been in danger, right? I feel like Black people have always been in danger. I feel like we've always been incarcerated more. I feel like we've always been over policed. I feel like I don't feel like it was so much worse in that 4-year span that, it's something that I should be like fearful of rolling back around again. And I don't know if that's my own cynicism or if that's, like the reality of the situation. Sorry, I went on longer than I meant to, Hiram. My apologies.
It's your show. You can go on as long as you want. What I was gonna say about all of this really quickly is, we live in a moment. We're in a moment right now where the fallacy of U.S. democracy, the fallacy of all the benefits of U.S. capitalism, of the government or whatever, are being made very clear for a lot of people. And it's much clearer for younger people. And the younger you are, the much clearer it is. For folks our age and up, it gets a little harder because you're stuck in your wage and cognitive dissonance. But for the young people who are witnessing genocide, who are witnessing all of these different things, who are seeing whole towns being washed away, who are seeing, right? Like the questions are coming up. The question is a very different younger group who are not all the way wrapped up in a lot of the identity stuff of like the generation right before them during the BLM stuff. For a number of reasons. I think things have just gotten so bad, right? That things become very, very clear and there's opportunities. We just saw a longshoremen's strike, right? That threatened to kind of like cripple a lot of things, and they were able to win. We see victories in these moments. So things get very bad, but we also see victories in these moments. They come with their contradictions. They come with all of the things, as everything does inside of the United States, right? But that we make use of those and we show folks, right? We take advantage of these opportunities in this moment, that we are in an incredible moment of deep pain and deep opportunity. Because everything is so clear for education and for politicizing people. If we take the time to do that with people, especially the folks who don't agree with us, we can spend all our days arguing about whether Kamala is a cop or not, whether Trump is bad, whether fashion is going to be here or not. What we all agree on is that the groceries are still way too fucking expensive. I will never own a home in my life. I don't know how long I'll be able to rent a damn home the way these things are going. You who grew up in your cities where you grew up in probably won't be able to stay there because of gentrification. Wars on top of wars. People our families around the globe, not just in the Middle East, but in Latin America, they're going to be dying. There's going to be a lot of suffering. There's going to be a lot of pain. You walk through New York, you walk through Philly, you walk through everywhere. The amount of homelessness, it just seems like it has doubled in the last 5-10 years. The amount of addiction, right? Like, it's also clear. I don't spend much of my time talking about elections or talking about those things. It's like, it's fine. That's where you're at. It's cool. You do what you think you need to do. In the meantime, let's talk about this system. Let's talk about this government. Let's talk about the root causes of all these things. And you may not get it right now, but I'm going to be here all year. I'm going to be here 2 years. I'm going to be here 3 years, right? And eventually I will help you make sense of what it is that you're seeing and what it is that you're experiencing. I don't want to just make sense of that, but also want to give you a space and somewhere to go to be able to do something about that, because someone has to pay for that. It's not just about, oh man, let's hold off fascism. Let's hold off the bad things. Let's hold off the bad things. I don't want to hold off, just hold off the bad things. Bad things have been happening to us and bad things have been happening to our people since the days we were brought here. Someone has to pay for that. Someone has to pay for the conditions that your grandmother was left in, right? For the early death that your grandfather and your father had to suffer. Someone has to pay for the addiction that your brother felt. Someone has to pay, right, for the 3 hours that you have to work and you don't get to see your kids that often because they're already sleeping by the time you get home, or you can't, right? Someone has to pay for that. Someone has to pay for the fact that your child's special needs were not addressed in public school adequately. He didn't get his ID, right? And they're setting him up for failing a horrible life. Someone has to pay for that. I don't care who it is, if it's Kamala, if it's Trump, we can debate that later. Someone has to pay for that. And I'm creating this space and helping create the organizations and the parties that will help you identify who is that someone, who are those someones, what is that system, and the mechanism to go fight. You may not be here now. That's fine. But I'm talking to you. I'm building a relationship with you. I'm getting to know you. So when that moment comes, and when your world comes crashing down, because unfortunately it will, because it happens to all of us, you will know who to call. You will know who to look for. You will know in which direction to go, as opposed to just sitting in your pain and in your oppression as an individual. Collectively, we can get through this. And so we talk about the elections and we talk about, well, who's going to be worse? And Kamala did this bad. And yes, they did bad, because that's the U.S. government. And we don't learn U.S. history in this country like that. And we're going to need those moments where the pedestal upon which the bourgeois state stands is shattered and toppled for folks, to catch them and bring them in and start showing the direction that we will walk to together towards that new freedom, towards that new liberation, towards that new world. Right? That is Yaki. That's Yaki Sales that talks about shattering the prestige of the bourgeois state. George Jackson talks about shattering the prestige of the bourgeois state. We can't force it, but they will do it themselves. We have to make sure that we are open, we are patient, we are willing to accept all of those with their contradictions and the contradictory things that they're saying right now. And next year, 2 years from now, when they're ready, that we have the mechanisms and the organizations ready to bring those folks in, politicize them, and get rocking and rolling.
But see, that's my point. And this is where I slightly disagree with several things I've been hearing so far. Because a lot of what you all are saying, and this is something that has been an issue for me with our platform here and some of the criticism of it, and just everything you all are saying presupposes a form and level of organization that does not exist. So when Lenin was talking about what he was talking about and how to engage, he was presupposing a level of organization that already existed that we don't have. So this is why.
Like, what do you mean? What would that organization look like that doesn't exist right now?
So that's what I'm trying to say. That's what I think we need to. That's my point around why I don't like engaging the Kamala voters and whoever else. I only want to engage those who are already in these spaces, claiming a certain level of analysis and understanding, to say we got to figure ourselves out so that we can build that apparatus that you're talking about, Hiram, that will welcome people in. So that's why that's what
they do exist. I would argue they do exist. Now, are they at the level that they need to be?
I don't agree with that. So but it's specific around this point around voting. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing it even happening right now. So all of my criticisms of a lot of different things.
What would that look like then? So I know what you're talking about. What would that organization, the one that exists, right, or needs to exist, what does that look like?
In this moment, I think there needs to be an electoral political arm of it. So that's why I keep talking about whether it's the after party or some sort of other effort. There needs to be some sort of Workers' Party, Socialist Party, Left Party, Black Party, all of these, whatever, or multiples that are organizing with the idea that they will unify around elections, that they will try to expand the collective reach of those involved, and would be an incubator to bring people in, with just an option to build an electoral, just another option to build another electoral space to engage people who are captured by that form of politics exclusively, that would bring them in to be politicized and encouraged into other forms of activism. So even that's why that was the part that was moving me around Daruba's call for this united front now. That I get all the differences and the contradictions that exist between Cornell, the PSL, the Greens, whomever else, but that's the kind of apparatus I think that actually needs to be built, because and then from within that bigger tent, once we get people voting for a certain set of bright line campaign issues, voting for candidates that we are developing, that are to do all the things that Jared was reading from Lenin's statement, that we've been, that would then maybe push people into either more socialist, or if necessary, green or black.
Like a Marxist working families party.
I don't know if I agree with that,
because that's just focused on the elections. That's just focused on elections. Because case in point, you have a PSL that exists, right? That uses that elections. Fine, whatever you feel about the PSL, whatever, right? The PSL is one example that exists. It has its apparatus, it has its branches across the country, it engages in labor struggles, it engages at the community level, right? There's a whole People's Forum, there's a whole BT News, there is there is all kinds of things that the web that exists, right? That comes out of this organization that is either branded or not branded or whatever, that exists and uses this elections, right, to heighten these contradictions. So Claudia's not out here trying to become the president of the United States, right? But offers something to folks that when you're having conversations about the elections, here's a whole other platform, right, that she's putting forward that you could talk about. And then there's other organizations that are growing. There's a Black Alliance for Peace that is growing. There's the traditional ones like the AARP. Now, are they where they need to be? Maybe not. But what I'm saying is that if we take this moment and we capitalize on this moment, instead of being like nothing exists and it sucks. I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but most people will be like, nothing exists, there's nothing to do. No, they do. Now, are they at capacity? Are they where they could be right now? No, but they're waiting for you. They need more hands on deck. They need more people to come in and build that and grow that. So I want us to be careful to be like, nothing exists. It doesn't exist.
I'm not saying nothing exists. I'm saying the apparatus that would bring people in doesn't exist, and in part because everybody is
bringing people in. They are bringing people in. I've sat here with you all for 2 years. 2 years, and I don't know how long. And we'll use BAP as an example, and Ricky and friends can chime in, right? I remember watching when there wasn't a whole lot of discussion of BAP. I remember when there wasn't a BAP. You hop on Black Liberation Media today, and there's mad BAPs going on in this chat than I've ever seen before. I look at Instagram, and not only do I see BAP, but then I see young Puerto Rican organizations, young Puerto Rican people who are developing their own organizations, also get like the diaspora, Boricua diasporas, right, who also get aligned with BAP. I see folks who an organization that didn't exist. Maybe
my point is being missed, and Ricky and others getting defensive and missing my point in the chat. So that's not what I'm not. So I'm not saying nobody's. Let me just get a second here. I'm not saying nobody's being.
Go ahead.
I'm not saying people are not bringing people in. I'm saying the what to do once they're in isn't collectively organized well enough. Right. So for instance, as I noted here, when you're talking about the dock workers' victory, I don't read it necessarily as a victory, and I don't read it as having anything to do with this groundswell of young people who have a level of clarity that didn't exist before. The dock workers
of organized work, of organized labor.
My point, though, Hiram, is that the dock workers they agreed to extend the contractual agreement under the current contract.
Right.
All right. So that's not a victory. But whatever they did, it's because they had already a pre-existing level of organization that they were able to build upon to push wherever they're getting. It's not that other people. So what I'm saying is, it's not that I'm not. Of course, I'm recognizing people joining various organizations. What I'm saying is, there needs to be some sort of, I do think it has to have an electoral, a collectivized electoral arm, just for the ability to reach. If the goal is to extend beyond our already existing circles, people are going to want to see, one of the first things they're going to want to see as something that they will find legitimate in the effort is an electoral option. And if all we end up doing within these groups is encouraging disparate third-party voting, non-voting, or ultimately voting for the Democrat or the lesser of evil, I think that we're not taking the steps forward that I would like to see. And where in a certain way, that's it. We're just not. So I would like to see that evolve and be organized, or other forms of collective organization among all the disparate groups that exist, and maybe building on some levels and increasing the numbers on some levels, but not reaching that, I guess, tipping point is what we would be looking for in terms of. So that's why when you mentioned George, when I read George Jackson, George is saying there needs to be an independent political party whose goal is at least to make room for revolution and to popularize the idea for revolution. This is happening in too many disparate places. So that's why I would rather spend my time arguing with you and whoever else is in this chat and saying, let's find other ways to build what, on what exists within these different groups to make something more, than reaching out to people who are not in these spaces, who are just looking for somewhere to go to vote. That was the part I was just trying to.
Can I jump in real quick? Because I want to point out that their strike is going to restart after they inaugurate whoever wins this debacle. And if they don't come to a collective agreement, they've agreed to hold off until after the inauguration, which blows my mind. The second thing, and I'm sure I'm pointing this out more for people who are watching so that they're aware, is that, this strike was going to affect everything but the military and the cruise ships. And so they had agreed when they went on strike that they were not going to halt military things from moving across the water, and they were not going to stop the people from getting on and off their cruise ships. So I think, for me, I was really irritated and kind of lost my excitement about the strike, to be honest, because this is what always inevitably happens, is you have what appears, for all intent and purposes, via the media and whatever conversations are happening, to be this like worker swell, right? Like this real push for workers. And what it actually is something that looks like it's a push for workers, but in the end is only going to negatively impact working people. Because if you're on a cruise right now, you are not struggling with your day-to-day. I mean, you could be, right? Like you could have just decided, I'm gonna take it out.
Yeah, you probably are. You overextended. Right? You did it. You blew up
your
credit card.
Right. You either overextended yourself because you decided, F it, I'm going on this cruise, or you're in a position in which going on a cruise was not going to impact you in any way, shape, or form. Or like, we're still bombing people. So like my mind was blown when I realized that was like part of the plan. And then when they decided that they were going to hold off and continue with their conversations until after the inauguration. And then, so you have to wonder, like, who does that, like, why that decision is something that sits in my mind. Like, what is it exactly that we're setting ourselves up for in the future? But I bring this up because I really wanted to point that out. But separately, I actually think Hiram and Jared are talking about the same, are in the end talking about the same thing. Whereas, I think it's two arms of the same body, right? Like you have to be able to organize on, and this is my opinion, that we have to be able to organize on both sides of this. We have to be able to organize on the ground in political education and, mutual aid and getting people to understand that we have to be in community and support each other. But just like I said yesterday, which is the question Imani Oakley asked me that I'll never forget, is what happens when the local government decides they don't care about your community garden and they want to sell that land to whichever, group is going to come in and buy up a bunch of property so they can put up housing and you know what I mean, like whatever happens. So, for me, it's almost a parallel fight that has to be going. And that's my opinion on this. And I'm sure people all the time say like electoral politics is stupid or whatever. But I also wanted to bring up this question that Ricky asked is the idea that you should walk into these spaces or that you should contribute to building in this space. And I think that's also where the problem happens, right? Like with what Jared wants to see happen, right? And I'm with you on this, Jared. Like, how do we make that happen? Like, do we wait until it seems like it's happening somewhere? Do you go into a space and you say, this is what we need to do? Like, I'm always harassing Jared about how do we make the after party happen? Like what's the first step?
And if I can, sorry. I just want to be clear because I see I'm still struggling to work it out, and the chat is right and unforgiving as always. But what I'm saying is, with all due respect to all I voted for the PSL. I already submitted my whatchamacallit. I had to write the names in and all of that. Happy to do it. But there are a number of people who are still in these left spaces who are either not voting for Greens, voting for Kamala, and I think that is a reflection of the levels of disorganization in these spaces that I would like to see collapsed. So I guess what I'm ultimately arguing is for an electoral united front that would put more of these folks into community with one another, that would develop some, again, bright line issues and candidates that would run. And then within that broader tent, as I see what happens within the Democratic Party, you could have other movements to support the PSL, the Greens, the Black this, the Puerto Rican that, the whoever whatever groups emerge within that. But at some point, I do think that there has to be some sort of coalescing around elections and electoral politics, not because I think the vote is the answer, not because, because I want this to even be a centerpiece of any of our efforts, but because this is what so much of the energy ends up being around, especially around these times of year, these times. So I'm even saying after, national elections and maybe particular whatever other forms of elections, all of these efforts and groups can go back to their traditional work. But when it comes to election time, when there's so much of the time is being taken up either by people running various campaigns for various political reasons, or it just dominates so much of the discussion, I would like for there to be an actually sort of militantly left option that people have more or less agreed upon within these spaces, that instead of competing against one another in terms of elections, not broader politics. I'm sure that between all of these left spaces, we can come up with 5-10 political planks. We could come up with some candidates. We could come up with some platforms, even some interesting conventions that would do all the things that I'm hearing, Jared, you read from Lenin, and that I think I'm hearing, Hiram, that would push the efforts that you're talking about. But my point is, for me, I want my energy to be spent in building and arguing in these spaces, not outside. Now, again, that's my own lack of effectiveness, my own personal whatever. But it's just where I'm at with it. I hope that.
Yeah.
All right.
I think for me, the thing that I go back to, and I do think all of us are articulating a slightly different version of what we think about this. I mean, even for me, with like the Lenin part, like I agree. Obviously, there was a higher level of organization. I mean, in terms of what he's thinking about, he is thinking about in the United States in that piece, which is part of why I think it is interesting, right? Because they're also the Communist Party at that point in 1920 was not particularly large in the United States yet. And actually, part of his polemic is against the IWW at that time, which some people think was wrong too. By the way, that they think that the Comintern should have worked more with the IWW in the United States because of the number of members that they had engaged in radical union organizing and things like that. But I think the part of the thing you're speaking to a level of sectarianism, right, and of not necessarily disunity. I mean, obviously disunity exists, but I don't know that everybody needs to be in unity with one another. But a kind of not everybody is also willing to align with one another around certain campaigns and objectives, that I think speaks to just that the fact that the left is not at a very, we're not in a space where the left has risen to a level of prominence where I think it makes enough sense for a lot of the different actors from their perspectives, at least, right, to say, okay, let's unify the Greens, PSL, different mutual aid organizations, et cetera, right, to come up with some kind of shared campaign like this. And so this is part of, for me, why I think on some level, it's like even starting smaller. I mean, I know voting is a very simple thing on a lot of levels, right? And it's not going to be where we're most effective. But I think where I agree with you, Jared, is like we do have to figure out what are going to be the shared practices, like what are going to be the things that can bring us together, that we're all willing to get behind and say we're all going to get behind this effort. Doesn't have to look exactly the same way. You're going to do your thing over here. We're going to do our thing over here. We have different approaches to how we're going to approach this problem, but we're all going to agree that it's a problem, and we're all going to kind of unite around trying to address that in our own various ways. And yeah, I also wish that we were there. And, I think electoral politics could be one of the arenas where that takes place. But I think that's where, that's the struggle, right? Is figuring out what are the issues also that bring people together too, that are also not just totally on our side. Because I hear you saying like you want to talk among all the people who are already politicized in a certain way to take this basic action, you know. But I think it's also about how do we make the difficulty of electoral politics, I think, right, is that it isn't always the space. It's often not the space, I think, where you could get people into a shared practice that then allows for a political education. So, you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense, but like, because we run up into so many of these ideological debates with people who are like really, really deeply invested in, I'm going to vote blue no matter who, or I'm going to vote Republican because this is what I believe, right? It creates these automatic ideological debates that are difficult to break because of the level of indoctrination that people are under. And so part of my argument is it actually is often probably other practices, whether that's tenant organizing, whether it's mutual aid, whether it's, different levels of political education, whether it's maybe it's even in union spaces, but you have to engage it, I do think, in an organized way. It can't just be like that just because of union consciousness, people are going to become revolutionaries or whatever, that you do have to figure out like what is going to be the thing that's going to put us in the same places where suddenly you care about my ideas. And I think part of what you care about my ideas is because the practices we're engaged in collectively are having some kind of positive impact on your life in some way, whereas I think when we're asking people to step into the electoral arena, what they fear is that the practices that we're asking people to engage in are going to actually harm their lives, which isn't true, I don't believe, but that's what they think, and so I think that's one of the hard parts to break through. So anyways, I don't know if that answered or responded to your question, but like that's one of the challenges I think about with it.
No, I think there are a lot of challenges, but I don't want to. I know. Let me let others jump back in here. I don't want to. Yeah. I just feel like, so even when people do the tenant workers and other, forms of organizing, I just feel like so many of them end up, when it comes to elections, they either end up going back to the Dems, or they go back to non-voting, or they go back to some other form, perhaps, of siloed political activism. And so it's just, so again, my approach is with the vote has only ever been to say, if we all agree on universal health care, no corporate investment, stopping police fund, I don't know, none of these things are coming from the Democrats. So I know, you may want a socialist world, you all may want some other form, you all may want some other form, but we all want these issues, and we know what you're going to do with the vote. So come on, let's stop fronting and throw in on the same page just for this thing. That's all. And then if I do think if they saw more of us doing that, it would look more attractive as we try to do other forms of work. But I just want to be clear, I am not denying the growth and the energy in various activist and organizational spaces. I just am concerned at times that maybe the energy dissipates too easily, or is it's certainly around election cycles. It's just consumed with all the stuff that we're. Yeah. Go ahead.
The one thing I would say is, the whole United Front thing. I mean, that needs to be studied. I here in this country, I don't know. Dhoruba talks about the United Front or the Black Panther one. I don't know what came from that. As far as I've read, nothing. But that's for Dhoruba to talk about. Right?
The critiques are great. I get it. I know.
I think that there's we have to go in principled unity, right? The Green Party is a very different politic from PSL. It's a very different, right? And I hear what you're saying, and that's fine. And folks can work that out. That's above my pay grade. That's not for me to decide, right? But those are two very, very different politics. And sometimes I think that activists and folks are just like, yeah, just throw them together, right? One is democratic socialists at best, and the other one is talking about locking up billionaires and nationalizing corporations. That is a massive gap in terms of
But in this moment, but I understand that, but in this moment, both are engaging at the level of electoral politics. So they're not engaging at the level of deep analysis and ideology. That's my only point on that. So I hear you, but I'm saying
what I'm saying is that when they are talking about the issues and when they're putting forth ideas and platforms and ways forward, two night and day, right? Like if you have Claudia talking about, nationalizing industries and arresting billionaires and that sort of thing, and the Greens are working out in tank tops talking to Trump supporters, that's like, you know what I'm saying? And so, but that's one thing for me, and why I bring up the strike with all of its contradictions, because we have to understand that everything in the United States is going to come with incredible contradictions, right? Labor in the United States is not the labor of this romanticized Trotskyist notion of like they're all revolutionaries. We know it's far from that and has been far from that for decades. But what it does show, and what it did show, even with all its contradictions around the military weapons, around its capitalist stuff or whatever, is the power of organized labor. It is the power, the threat of withholding your labor at strategic moments, at crucial points, right? Where you can intervene, be in the economy, in all of that, to use them as lessons. Now you can highlight the contradictions of that. What does that look like in the United States as opposed to maybe another country? Why is it that United States labor is so backward a lot and reactionary a lot of times, right? And it offers you these teachable moments. So for me, it's like, in this moment, let's just grasp and learn from everything that we can, turn them all into teachable moments, and talk about the contradictions, talk about but also show the power. This is a demonstration of power that even those who are making decisions at the highest gubernatorial levels, right, have to yield. They have to yield to worker power. Unfortunately, in this country, most of the time that's reactionary, or it's kind of like it's still capitalist at best. But it shows that they will yield. They have to. So if we're talking about invading Iran, and we're talking about whoever comes into office regardless, but the invasions of Iran, those oil prices are going to go up. That gas price is going to go up. We saw what the increase of gas prices did in the 70s, right? At the beginning of neoliberalism and the gas lines or whatever, right? It goes back to what I was saying, preparing people for these moments and then engaging them where they're at. Why is labor so reactionary? A lot of times you're talking about trades unions. Why is labor so kind of like, you're missing the part? Because who's talking to them? Who is organizing them? They have their unions, but who are the folks? Sometimes we in these organizations, or we with this level of consciousness, can engage in a level of elitism, right? That we know best. I'm not saying this is what you're saying, Jared. I have no time for them. They're reactionary. I'm not going to waste my time talking to them. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go get some job driving a forklift. I'm not going to go talk to these Uber drivers or whatever. I'm not right, because my mind is meant elsewhere, doing better things, bigger things. So then who is talking to them? Who is organizing them? And so for our organizations, if we want to see something different and we want to see a labor union that doesn't yield to militarism or whatever, that uses its power for things more than just their contracts and their own internal benefits, you've got to go organize them. And unfortunately, in this country, we have had decades and decades and decades of counter-revolution, of counterinsurgency, of comfort, of all kinds of things, that we are way, 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 way behind.
But Hiram, that's sort of my point. But this is sort of my point.
I hear
when
you.
I do. So if I do go and talk to these to working people or whoever that you know, by association or extension, I'm being, said to be an elitist, not one to talk. I know you're not saying that, but I know how it reads out in the chat. So let me just talk to the chat. I know you're not saying that. But when I do go and do that, invariably, what it ends up coming back to is, what am I going to do with the vote? People will listen to me. My experience has been, they'll listen to me when I want to talk my variations of nationalism and socialism and various other whatever politics. They'll listen, they'll engage, but invariably it comes back to, what practical steps can I take for my job, for my situation? This union is doing this. This Democratic candidate is doing that. Jared, what do you have? And I'm always saying something like, there's the PSL, there's the Green, and it's the same propagandized response. That's why, and I get frustrated with that, and I don't have the skill to overcome that argument in that space. So that's why I come back to these spaces and say, right, we got to have a better answer for that. We need to prepare a better incubator and answer for that. And that's what I want to advocate, so that when I do go back and have that, and they say, but then what you going to do? I can say, we got this. Come sign up. We got this right here.
They're looking for the project. They're looking for, what can you show me? What I had said before, right? Organizations need to move beyond just marches in the street, move beyond just protesting, move beyond just you have to build political projects. You have to build alternative institutions, not in an anarcho sense, sort of kind of like just willy-nilly or whatever. And not even so much with Kali, because Kali is very much into like the municipalism. And I think Kali has kind of retreated into this sort of like, it's all over, grab whoever you can, head for the hills, and just may the best person survive type thing, right? What I'm saying is, and it's no shade, it's just that, right, where a lot of folks at, and that's totally fine, right? There's a lot of different things. Organizations need to build political projects. You need to give viable alternatives to the people.
And all I'm saying is that one of those projects has to be a collaborative electoral political one. That's my only point in it.
I get it. Yeah. Elections aren't my thing, right? And so I'm like, I get it. I'm not gonna say don't do it. I would have questions around, all right, so how do you not get captured by the bureaucracy of the machine? How do you overcome the billions of dollars of the Democrats and the Republicans? Because third parties have been trying to do this for centuries, right? Folks have been trying to do this thing for eons and eons and eons, and it doesn't crack. How do you not fall into the careerism of that? How do you not fall into, okay, we got close, but let's work to prepare for the next 4 years. Okay, let's prepare to build for the next 4 years, kind of like in the way the Working Families Party does, right? But in the meantime, who is building the political project, the alternatives, the counter to these institutions? Who is building that if we are stuck and focused on, okay, let's whittle all of our principles down so that we can find some sort of alignment and agreement to keep running this thing every 4 years or every couple of years or whatever, which is fine if you want to do that. And if our organizations have the capacity and the size to be able to engage in that, by all means, go for it. I'm speaking to young people and organizers and those who consider themselves organizers, right? In the meantime, what are the political projects that are being built to show people the alternative and provide them spaces so that they can have their needs met, but also be organized and educated politically in a way that kind of the breakfast programs did, right? That the Panthers did, and not to romanticize those things, but in that moment when breakfast didn't exist, when these things didn't exist, right? How do you create the programs and the projects that are going to fill the ranks of your organization, politicize people, while also meeting the needs so that the people don't have to look to the state anymore, who's not providing anything for those folks in the South, who has never had, right? And then build up the capacity to then fight the fight that George, because while George is also talking about elections in the book, which he said they're bullshit because they're already captured by corporations and corporate whatever, George is also talking about firing RPGs at U.S. Army tanks in alleyways in Chicago. Because ultimately, right, there will never be a moment where the ruling class allows you and your cool party to overtake their political system, their economy, or any of that. And so as we prepare for that struggle, because they're not going to let you vote them out, they're not going to let you get even close to having any sort of real impact on the electorate, let's build these things over here on the side. I'm not saying don't do it. Do it. Try it. Do everything. Lenin said it. George says it. But they also said, and also know Babylon is going to have to burn. And so get your matches ready and get your people ready, right? And that's what I'm saying. So if you're using the elections as a way of like, hey, y'all, this is all bullshit and Babylon's got to burn, okay. But if it's like, hey, y'all, we have a shot at this and we can really do this, that's something else. And that's where the politics of the organizations comes into play. And so when folks like the United Front get Cornell, the Greens and the PSL together and do what? Those politics are all over the place. And they're all fighting Democratic Party lawsuits in Ohio and Pennsylvania and everywhere to kick them off those ballots, spending tons and tons and tons of resources because you need electorate lawyers to fight those things, or else you fight them themselves. So now you're stuck doing that and you're not out building this. And you get wrapped up in the bureaucracy. Jared W., we talked about this when I was talking about the defund, right? And when we all went defund and then didn't recognize that we took a whole movement and threw them into the bureaucracy of municipal governments, and they were just stuck doing that. And all the protests and then riots stopped because everyone is fighting budget campaigns at the municipal level. And so we think of elections and think of all that. That's where my mind is going. And so it's fine. We could be dear brother, all we want for elections. But what are we building in the meantime? What are we building? And our political organizations from the PSL on down needs to move beyond just the righteous and the correct protesting and the marching. And that's it. But we need to build real political projects, real institutions, internationalists, right? And domestically, so that when the crisis hits, we can bring in the folks, not just young people, because it's not going to be just young people. It's going to be old people like us. Old people like us are looking for organizations to join. Old people like us are looking for some way to get into the fight. How do you create organizations that also make use of old people like us who come with skill sets?
Who's us?
Level.
Who's us?
I'm talking to
I'm joking.
Right? I'm talking to the brothers here, right, who make use of us, because a lot of our organizations are so geared to young people, and that's dope, and rightfully so. But an old head like me who can't be at 14 meetings a week, who can't be on every single call, who can't be or whatever, I think I got something to share. I think I got some skills that I could help a political organization. But sometimes those organizations don't have the capacity or the mechanisms to hold somebody like me just because of the way they're set up. That's what we need to be thinking about. So I'm not worried about elections. I'm thinking about, hey, organizations that exist right now, what can you do to bring in a Jared Ball? Jared Ball got a lot of ideas and a lot of talents. Jared W., a lot of ideas, a lot of talents. Hiram just likes to rant and yell a lot or whatever, right? But there's more of us out here. And there's going to be even older than us that when that moment hits, they're going to be looking for something. Let's start building that. And let's start building those institutions. Let's start building the alternatives to the bourgeois state so that when it does collapse and Babylon does get burned down, that the people aren't just left in some sort of like welcome to the Thunderdome moment. And you have the institutions that can step in and govern and provide for the people in that moment of need, in that moment of transition. I don't care. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not worried about the election. So go organize your workplace, organize your campus, organize your dormitory, organize the 4 friends you got on the corner. Go talk to the folks in labor. Go talk to everybody. Talk to everybody. Organize your spaces. If you need help, contact me. I do organizing trainings all the time. There's plenty of us who do it. And if you want to do elections, Dr. Ball is here with wonderful ideas about the elections. Let's do all of that. But we have to build the alternatives. It's got to go march, and protest, yes. And we have to build the political project and the institutions. So when Jared, when you're talking to folks, say, well, what you got? Dear brother, I got this right here. I got this right here. We doing this and we doing that. And if we ain't doing it, they doing it over there.
And yesterday we talked a little because J-Dub had made a statement about like him not doing much, and I just wanted to point out again that like this is the importance of this space, right? Like if it wasn't for this channel, I would not know that Hiram existed as a person, right? And now I'm on text every time I need something like, Hiram, you got a minute? Like, can you help me with something real quick? And so, the point in this type of space is to allow these conversations to happen, to point out these contradictions, to let Jared talk about the after party, and to let Hiram talk about why he don't really care about elections, but this is the thing that we need to be doing on the streets, and to allow people to engage in listening to this conversation. Ricky, I made him J-Dub because the whole trying to decipher which Jared I was talking to was too difficult. So, but for me, this is the important piece, right? And I am like you, Hiram, like the amount of things I get invited to, and I'm like, y'all, I gotta make dinner, I gotta get my child to school, I gotta pick my child up from school, I gotta do whatever thing has to be done. I can't go to all these meetings, but I do, I have my monthly thing that I go out every month and I make sure that I do this thing in Orange, and then I try to show up at this thing in Maplewood, and I go to Newark when I can, and I'm writing for the paper, like all these different things. And I think what I really want to encourage people to do is to do the thing that you can make space to do. And for right now, that's really all you can ask of people. And it's tricky because it's the one thing the system doesn't really want us to do, right? Like the system doesn't really want people to stop being, like I said yesterday, to stop spinning on their hamster wheel and actually do something that is going to be outside of just spinning on that hamster wheel. So, we're in a rough space, and I don't really have great answers about, anything, but I do encourage people to go out and to look for things to be involved in. And somebody put this out there, and I think maybe it's something that our collective should contemplate. Is one thing that would help is all these progressive YouTubers with platforms should have links to all these activist organizations. Social media is a great educating, organizing, and fundraising. And I encourage people to get off the internet and go do something outside. But perhaps if we provide people with links in order for them to go find the spaces in their own communities where they can engage off of the internet and off of YouTube, that could be helpful, just as a thought. And it's something that, I'll bring back to the collective, like, when we meet again to talk about maybe being a possibility. We'll see.
I want to say one thing right quick, because Jared, Dr. Ball had said, right, you don't want to talk to these folks or whatever. And I get that, but you do.
That wasn't my point, actually. But that point got lost. It wasn't that I was saying I don't want to talk to working people. It was saying I don't want to have the arguments with I'm all lesser evil. That's all.
Right. No, yeah, I get that. What I'm saying, what I was going to say is, in terms of organizing, creating, you all have created, right? You all have modeled that. You have created this alternative media space. You do what corporate media doesn't do, and you do it in tandem with Millennials Are Killing Capitalism. You do it in tandem with Breakthrough News, right? You do it in tandem with, and you are speaking to the folks that nobody is speaking to. A lot of us end up being around our age in here, right? And it offers a space where folks can talk or whatever. None of this is rocket science. I say because it's not rocket. I mean, this is hard work what you all do here, right? This is a platform. But to speak to what I'm saying, you all, Jared, right, Renee, Jared, you're doing it already. You create these spaces where you're engaging in conversation with people. You're using these moments with all their contradictions as teachable moments to introduce politics to folks. You're allowing for debate. You're introducing people to organizations and other individuals, right? You're engaging in that work, and you've created an alternative system. So when they're like, look, I don't want to look at MSNBC no more. I don't want to watch CNN. I don't want, you've offered something else. And if we can't do it, well, then go watch this, right? Y'all doing a collaboration show today to offer the viewers, here's yet another channel you can also go to and learn some more stuff from, right? You all are already doing it through this platform. And and it's intergenerational. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, get in where you fit in. If you have a particular skill set, you have a particular passion, you have a particular, well, then go find the folks who are into that. And if it doesn't exist, then build it, and they will come. And then sometimes it'll split up and break off, whatever. And then you keep building and build another one. And build another one. And as long as the people have their alternatives, right? And then you start clicking up with those who think like you in true unity, in a true united front, based off of that work, the political projects that you're doing, how they align, and then we're joining forces to double the impact. This is BLM and Millennials Are Killing Capitalism. Y'all are doing it
like
in real time.
Put it all together. That's why I like it.
All right. Well, we can't get in trouble. We got 3 minutes. And
oh damn, I lost track of
this,
time.
I know. And this went really well. So J-Dub, I do hope that we can reconvene and do this again in the future. And I like the whole back-to-back. It gave us more time to talk through a bunch of things, which was what I had really hoped to do. So I do hope that anyone who's watching today will find Millennials Are Killing Capitalism, follow them, support them, be it materially or just by sharing what they do. I'm so appreciative of all the work that Jared and that team does. Because I learn from your channel every week. I learn something. And so I appreciate the effort. Hiram, I appreciate you jumping on when you can. I'll be texting you soon because Josie just yelled at me to remind you of something. And so I'll be on text. And then, for the chat, thank you. And, Jared, I'll let you close it out. Well, actually, let J-Dub say something first.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then you close it
please. No problem.
Yeah, just thank you for doing this and for having the conversation. Somebody did ask about this book quickly. It's Hezbollah, Politics and Religion by Amal Saad. It's 2003, so it's a little bit dated in terms of it doesn't cover the 06 war. It doesn't cover last 20 years, but really good on kind of the foundations of the party, Nasrallah, also the class politics of Hezbollah, which is a very interesting area. So yeah, I definitely recommend it for people who want to learn more about Hezbollah as a party. But yeah, so that's what that is. But thank you so much. And thank you for this conversation, this channel, for all that you do. And we'll have to do it again soon. I want to do that conversation we were talking about yesterday where we talk about all the problems with this platform that we're streaming from right now. And
let's do it. That's
but why we're here anyway.
Patreon. Yeah. Hiram, Jared, Renee, remixers, peace, because I know you're willing to fight for it. Like Fred Hampton used to say, there's a video about Kamala and the HBCU stuff that we didn't get to today in the show description. Enjoy. Peace, everybody. Catch you next time on Saturday with Renee.